welcome to New England Authors. So good to have you here. We're in our Cambridge studio and we broadcast all over New England. And our guest today is Shirley Riga. Welcome to the show. You tell in this book that we're going to be talking about, you tell an extraordinarily painful, powerful, and realistic account about parenting a chronically ill child. You don't preach, you just simply tell all the years and the ways that you struggled. And was it your intent to share or to help other people who are in similar situations?
Absolutely. Through the process, I often found myself feeling very alone in it because it was 32 years ago, or over 32 years ago now, and there was really no internet to say.
Yeah.
And parenting a chronically ill child, that I lived in Western Massachusetts, and the closest I could get to being in a support group was Boston.
Yeah.
And so I felt alone a lot. And
during the experience.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And did writing the book, was that something that really helped you personally?
It was very cathartic to write it.
Yeah.
Journaling helped me a lot, and it was the journals that helped me put the book together.
I see.
Because I couldn't just write the book from my experience. A lot of the stuff, we go through difficult things and we forget in order to deal with them.
Yeah.
And
Now, your daughter, Lisa, was diagnosed with a liver ailment when she was 9 weeks old?
9 weeks of age.
Yeah,
right.
9 weeks of age. And you found out that there was a serious liver problem there. Now, I know you've told this story to every doctor and every medical student, but I hope you're not tired of telling the story, and I wish you would just fill us in what happened.
Yeah, that's not a problem. It was a normal pregnancy and a normal birth, and she was jaundiced after birth, and I was told that's normal, but it never went away. And so by the time we went to Boston Children's Hospital, she was getting more jaundice, and that was maybe 7 weeks.
Yeah.
And so we went right from thinking we had a normal child to being plunged into realizing that there was something very wrong. And it wasn't until after major abdominal surgery that they discovered she had liver disease. And there was a biopsy done during that surgery where they discovered within a week later that she had a second liver disease, which Boston Children's is a teaching hospital.
Yeah.
It made the news.
Yeah.
Because it was so very rare to happen.
Yeah. And during that operation, there was part of a plastic that was left in
drain.
Yeah,
Yeah, it was
plastic
the drain.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, Lisa, poor child, was poked and she was injected and operated on, and her veins collapsed, right?
She had a real tough time with her veins all the time. I mean, there were times that they had to tap her with an IV on her scalp. They had to do it on her leg, and she was in a walker during a lot because she couldn't crawl. And it was tricky. It became very problematic, even as she grew.
Yeah, so it affected your whole family. This was your second child, right?
Right.
Yeah, it affected your whole family, right?
Absolutely.
And you had to come in to from Western Massachusetts to Boston to a children's hospital. They do miracles in children's hospital.
They do miracles, and they saved her life.
Yeah.
The operation saved her life, but it wasn't a disease that was going to go away. It just extended the process.
So this miracle that Lisa lived resulted not just from your devotion to her, but your devotion to yourself as well. That's the feeling I got from your book, right?
Yeah,
you had to take care of yourself.
I didn't start out that way, though. I became agoraphobic. I was afraid to go out of the house. I really became dysfunctional. And whenever I went out, people would ask how things were, and I'd have a panic attack.
Yeah.
And so it was through therapy, through journaling, through just seeing repeated things that were happening, I started realizing, even though I'm getting help, I needed to help myself. It was a process, and because it was just so traumatic.
Yeah.
And it's through that process that I started discovering ways to help myself. And I'm a huge believer in modeling, and modeling to help other people who are in similar situations.
Oh, I see. I see.
Because this is a topic that people don't talk about. It's a very uncomfortable topic, sick children.
Yeah.
And so it was hard to talk to anybody about it.
Yeah.
Except the
Yeah,
professionals.
it was a heart-wrenching book. And Lisa, as she grew up, became emotionally volatile. Was that?
Yeah.
Well, how much of that was due to like the sickness that she had to go and
Yeah. Well, when you think about a child that is continually interrupted with medical procedures that she didn't want, and she kept getting fevers, getting sick, and it was very, very frustrating for her. And so she was volatile. She, as she got older and stronger, she broke windows, she slammed doors, she scratched her sister's cornea once and it sent us all to the doctors, and her poor sister had a scratch on her cornea with a patch and everything. It was a very, very hard time. And
what was she saying? Why me? Why do I have?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah.
I
We
can see
worked
that.
with child psychiatrists and psychologists many years to help her accept the fact that she is sick with a chronic liver disease. And one child psychologist in particular, when she was a young teenager, paid her to write a report on her liver.
Really?
So that she could learn what her liver does and start owning the fact that it's her. I mean, it was very, very effective.
Yeah.
And she got some money, and we all, it helped us all with her understanding of what's going on.
How interesting. Also, you went to a psychologist yourself.
Absolutely.
And the psychologist said to you that you are her safe person and that you need to be strong against her temper tantrums.
Absolutely.
And also that you need to set limits. Can you talk a little about that?
Sure. And this was the same psychologist. He
I
was
see.
very
For
effective
you. Yeah.
with our family. Because when somebody is so terrified of what's happening to them, people of safety are there, help hold them together, but it's also a safe place for the person who's terrified to let loose their feelings. And we had several incidents where she lost total control of herself in having a tantrum at the ripe age of 14, which is a little too old for that.
Yeah.
And she started hitting me. She started pushing me around, and at that point she was getting taller than me. And it was like the power imbalance happened. And it was up to me to stand up against her and just be that solid presence where she could be as terrified and scared as she can be, and I would still be there, which was hard for me because when she would cry, it would trigger me to remember the hours in the hospital. It would trigger me. So I had to work with a therapist in order to deal with that, in order to be with her. And it did happen. I was able to stand up against her, and she felt that safety. And I remember the therapist or the psychologist saying to me that she needs something solid to kick against because she is terrified of dying, which rightly so.
Yeah.
And it was me. So.
And to make matters worse, and this often happens with parents of a chronically ill child, the marriage falls apart, and this happens to you as well.
It did.
Yeah.
We, and ironically, I had started going back to school to become a family therapist to help work with these problems.
I see.
But between money and my daughter getting sick, I didn't finish. But one of the things I realized is that oftentimes one parent becomes the moneymaker and the other one deals with all the home issues.
Yeah.
And at that time, my ex-husband, he didn't believe in therapy. So I had to fight with him to get her to a therapist. And it's a really tough thing. I have seen couples grow stronger together, but that didn't happen to me.
I see. This is New England Authors. We're talking with Shirley Riga, and this is a fascinating book, Tools for the Exceptional Parent of a Chronically Ill Child. And it's a very beautifully written personal account of dealing with a chronically ill child, and it's there to help other people in similar situations. In reading this book, I was thanking the universe for my good health, you know, and many times during the ordeal, you were on the brink of collapse. And I remember one incident that you talk about. You were in a supermarket, and then in the next aisle over, you heard a child cry and went into a panic attack.
Right.
And
you can't control them when they happen instantaneously. It was through work with a therapist that I learned that dealing with panic attacks, they do have signals that are being sent that if we know what to look for, we can catch them in time. And I didn't know that then, and so it's embarrassing. It's I've seen other people in the public having panic attacks. And you know, there are ways to control them. It's really why I found myself in a bookstore looking in books for help, and that's when I found the book Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway, because I had so much fear about my daughter dying, about how I can handle anything, about my family unit, everything. And that's why that book is there, because it became my anchor in surviving, learning how to deal, learning tools to help me deal with the fear of what I was facing with both my girls. Because not only was my daughter chronically ill, but her sister, who was 2 years older, who was healthy, almost felt left out all the time. And so there was behaviors from her that were difficult to deal with, because she was trying to fight for being in the family unit. She was wanting to be sick so she could get all the attention, which is the last thing you want anybody to say when you're dealing with such serious illness.
Now, you cite a few techniques for dealing with your situation. And one of the strategies you mentioned was keeping the journal.
Oh, yes.
Which became the backbone of your book. Could you tell us what keeping a journal does for you?
So it was through a therapist that suggested, because I had so many emotions going on, that I start writing them down. And I hated to journal. I didn't want to take the time to journal. But I found as I started journaling, it was a place for me to put my rage, to put my fear, to put my feelings, and it was only for me. And it became a very powerful place for me to talk to a friend, which was me. I was talking to myself and just saying anything I wanted, and it was a great way to vent. And it gave me space in my head to be able to deal with what was happening.
Yeah. So can I ask you, another strategy you had was passing a coin from one hand to another. I guess it's like a rosary or prayer beads people have commented to me that I fiddle around with my fingers when I'm talking. And well, how does that help you?
Well, I happen to have a coin. And I learned this from a therapist, again, that when you pass a coin from one hand to the other in a methodical way, it's like knitting. And knitting is calming. You're using both sides of the brain. And it creates this calming sensation. And so it's something that I could do when I was in the grocery store, standing
Yeah.
in line. I'd have a coin in my hand.
And
Nobody would know, and even though there's a lot of turmoil going on, I was able to control that with a coin.
I
And
see.
you can do it with a paper clip or whatever, and but it's the methodical passing. And I did actually find this on Google years later, that this is a technique for
calming you down.
Yeah, yeah.
I think also people who use the mouse, and that's a kind of a calming technique. When I play my Sudoku, I like using a little mouse on.
Well, plus you're focusing, so that is helpful.
Yeah. You
but
also talk about meditation.
Yes. Yes.
Any particular kind of meditation, or is it just sitting still?
Well, sitting still for me was not something that I could do because my mind would start. And I've actually grown into meditation because I had a hard time sitting still. Of course, all the worries would start. And so I read a book on walking and meditating and being mindful in paying attention to my feet touching the ground, which is actually a way of grounding, which helps with any panic situation because you're in your body more. And I've since grown into more meditation using either guided meditation or, if I can handle it, being quiet. But when the mind is busy worrying, it's hard to be quiet because it's screaming.
Okay, what about self-help groups? Actually, you started one, didn't you?
I did.
Yeah.
I actually have started several. I
Yeah.
started one years and years back that was not supported by a professional, and it was just parents running it, and that didn't work. Years later, when my daughter was about 12, I started another one. We called it Our Care Support Group, which is all about our care as a caregiver. And that ran for 6 years, and with a core group of parents, mostly mothers, who were dealing with serious brain tumors, cystic fibrosis, cancer, serious children's diseases or diseases that were in their children. And we're still in touch today. We're not actually running the group. And I was diagnosed with fibromyalgia near the end of that, and that's when I had to give it up.
I see. I'm sorry. So can you tell us a little bit what happened to Lisa after, she had her temper tantrums when she was 14 and a volatile childhood. Did she calm down?
She calmed down. She started to, it was a fight, but she started accepting the fact that her liver disease was not going to go away, which was a really hard thing for any of us to accept. I, in fact, kept looking for a cure for years and years until her doctor sat me down and said, it's going to do her a favor if I stop doing this.
I see.
Because it's pretty hard to accept the fact that your daughter has a terminal illness. But she had a lot of support. She had a lot of friends. She never actually had a serious love in her life, but she had a lot of friends, and all the professionals within medical and the education supported her in any way they could. She ended up graduating high school. She had been sick maybe a month before that, but I had vowed if I had to roll her down the aisle, she was going to graduate, and she agreed.
And she got her diploma.
But she walked to get her diploma. We got her into a LaSalle College in Newton that had a special needs program, so that we had protocol set up in case she got sick, which she did. And she was close to Boston, but she graduated from there. She got an accounting degree, and then she ended up working in the she was in the Western Mass area, and worked as a temp accountant, and then ended up getting hired and was there for the full length of her life until she had to go on family medical leave. And she had her own apartment, and
she was on the list for a transplant of a liver, right?
Well, the list, yes, she was, but she was doing really well, and then things changed really quickly, and she was put on the Massachusetts Mass General list, and then things kept deteriorating, and realized that we wouldn't have time to get a liver in Massachusetts. And so we had to move to the Indiana Transplant Center at Indiana University. And I went with her there. We flew down by Learjet from the hospital in Boston to the hospital in Indiana.
Yeah.
And we were there for 6 weeks, but everything went downhill very, very quickly. And we just ran out of time. It was quite unfortunate. And
So-
not easy to say. So.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I would like to say what a courageous person you were to write such a personal account, and very well written, and as I said, it really, I think it seems to help other people in the similar situations there. You obtained medications, therapy, counseling from professionals. You had assertiveness training, stress relieving techniques, self-help books. We talked about the facility. You facilitated support groups. Can you tell us some of these that were the more helpful to you?
Well, of course, therapy is extremely helpful because the more I understood myself, the more I could deal with the crisis that was ongoing. It helped me deal with both my children. It helped me dealing with my own sleeping. It helped me deal with everything because it gave me tools for understanding myself. That was the hugest thing. Finding Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway, I learned ways to learn to make decisions in a positive way instead of negative way. Because decision making, especially when you're dealing as a caregiver, can be so burdensome, thinking that if you make the wrong decision, it's going to affect somebody's life. But there's a way of looking at decision making that can be a win-win way. And that's one of the many things I learned through Feel the Fear.
Yeah, I wanted you to talk about that. Feel the fear and do it anyway.
Right.
You know, you got a lot of inspiration from that.
It was amazing.
Yeah,
Yes.
tell us about that.
Sure.
Is it about living in the moment, or what is
There's
it?
a lot about living in the moment. Dr. Susan Jeffers wrote it over 20 years ago. She was a psychologist, an American psychologist. She unfortunately died in 2012, but her book and her legacy lives on because it has helped people worldwide. It's actually much more popular in Europe and other countries besides the United States.
Interesting.
It's used in the UK by psychiatrists and psychologists. They actually write prescriptions for having people read it who are experiencing depression and anxiety. They actually write prescriptions for them to read the book,
Yeah.
which I wish it would happen here because it is so helpful.
Yeah.
But the book has many ways of looking at a chatterbox, for one thing. We all have a chatterbox going in our heads.
Yeah.
And if it's full of negativity, that's what we emanate out. And so it's relearning how to listen to ourselves and be kind to ourselves.
Yeah.
And we're not, instead of being our worst enemy, we can be our best friend inside. And so it's tools for learning that. It really helped change my life.
Excellent.
And so much so I became licensed and I now teach it.
Licensed in?
Licensed as a Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway trainer in the United States. I'm licensed, one of 2 trainers in the United States.
Where are you at now?
So where am I at now?
Are you in a good place?
Well, you know, I just finished going through the anniversary time of her getting sick, really sick, and then dying, and then her birthday was after that. And so we just got through that, and it's not easy.
Yeah.
And I do exercises to help myself ground myself, because when we are in our body, we are less likely to be worrying about what's coming or what has happened. And that, to me, is a key to staying in my power.
And then she died, as I said, just before her 32nd birthday, right?
Right.
What was that like? And this was in Indiana, right?
It was in Indiana,
Yeah.
right.
Tell us.
I was alone with her down there. People would come and go, fly in and fly out. And as things started progressing in the transplant hospital, which was wonderful, we were all surprised at the turn of events. It was almost like she decided, I'm done.
Right.
And we had one incident that the nurse said, this isn't good, and I'm not sure if we're heading into not a good area. And so I called everybody. And it was within that 24-hour period when people were making their plans to fly down is when she left. Mm-hmm. And we were all saying, she hasn't left yet, but she had.
Yeah.
And so it really surprised everybody. And it's a hard life to live if you receive a transplant. And she had deteriorated enough that she needed 6 organs to live.
Yes.
And Indiana was one of the very few transplant hospitals that do multi-visceral transplants.
Yeah.
And so she needed almost all her organs replaced.
But as you point out in the book, she went downhill really fast in that period of time.
She absolutely did.
Yeah. Thank you so much for being with us. Thank
Sure.
you. This is New England Authors. We record in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and broadcast around the New England area. Remember, watch locally. Thank you.
Thank you so much.